Well, I got my notes, check. Sunglasses, check. Hat, check. Pepsi, check. Thick skin, check. Let's go. Hey, welcome to Golden Blue Dude, everybody. If you're a college football fan, might as well hit the like and subscribe button because that's all we do over here. Go check out our Patreon page. We call our Patreons the shot callers because that's exactly what they do around here. And when the regular season gets here, our Patreons will get to decide which game we'll live stream, and you'll get to watch with Golden Blue Dude. And the score prediction contest will be coming back. Every week I pick out a game and my Patreons guess the score, and whoever comes closest to the score wins $20 every single week, and you can win as many times as you want. The higher the Patreon, the more guesses you get per week. Well, I think we can all agree that the eventual plan is to break off from the NCAA, create your own conference division, whatever you want to call it, between the Big Ten and the SEC. They're going to get to their magic number, whatever that is, and then just create their own playoffs and national championship. The problem that I have with that is the low-hanging fruit that they'll be bringing with them. I don't think that's quite fair. I think there's some low-hanging fruit that don't deserve to break off with them. So in this particular scenario, yes, I still have them breaking off and creating their own playoffs and national championship. Top 50 teams getting rid of the low-hanging fruit. Will this ever happen? Probably not. But if it were to happen, this is how I think it would go down. And I'm going to go conference by conference, give you my solid yeses, my 50-50s, and my solid no's. For the Big Ten, we'll start with the Big Ten. My solid yeses would be Iowa, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Nebraska, Ohio State, Penn State, Purdue, UCLA, USC, and Wisconsin. Yes, I'm counting UCLA and USC in the Big Ten for this particular video. So 11 solid yeses for the Big Ten. That's actually pretty good. I don't have any 50-50s for the Big Ten. So that means I have 5 solid no's. My solid no's are Illinois, Indiana, Maryland, Northwestern, and Rutgers. Sorry, I just don't think your brand in football brings enough to the table to where it gives you the excuse to break off with everybody else. Now on to the Big 12. First, I have 5 solid yeses. Baylor, BYU, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, and West Virginia. I have 6 50-50s. And that's Cincinnati, Houston, Iowa State, Kansas State, TCU, and UCF. 1 solid no, and that's Kansas. Remember, this is for football, not basketball. On to the SEC. I have 10 solid yeses. Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, LSU, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas A&M. But I have 5 50-50s, and that's Arkansas, Kentucky, Mississippi State, Missouri, and South Carolina. 1 solid no, you already know the answer, and that's Vanderbilt. Now for the ACC, only have 7 solid yeses. Not good, ACC. That's Clemson, Florida State, Louisville, Miami, North Carolina, NC State, and Virginia Tech. Now I have 4 50-50s, and that's Georgia Tech, Pitt, Syracuse, and Virginia. That means I have 3 solid no's, and that's Boston College, Duke, and Wake Forest. And I know Wake Forest just had a great season, but still, your brand just doesn't bring enough to the table to allow for you to break off with everybody else. And finally, the Pac-12, which is actually now the Pac-10. I only have 3 solid yeses. Yikes. And that's Oregon, Utah, and Washington. I have 4 50-50s, and that's Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Stanford, and 3 solid no's. That's Cal, Oregon State, and Washington State. And no, I am not bending off of this. Counting Notre Dame because they're not part of a conference, and of course they're a solid yes. I have 37 solid yeses, and I'm trying to get to 50, but here's the first 37. Iowa, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Nebraska, Ohio State, Penn State, Purdue, UCLA, USC, Wisconsin, Baylor, BYU, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, West Virginia, Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, LSU, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas, Texas A&M, Clemson, Florida State, Louisville, Miami, North Carolina, NC State, Virginia Tech, Oregon, Utah, Washington, and Notre Dame. So those are the 37 solid yeses, but we need to get it to 50. So there's 13 50-50s that are going to make the cut. So the first 50-50 that makes the cut is Arkansas. Yes, I had them at a 50-50, but I think they've done enough. Their brand is decent enough. They get enough fan support to where they would make the cut. One of the first teams to make the cut, actually. The next team to make the cut, Kentucky. Historically, not a great football team. Great basketball, but not a great football team. However, they do get great fan support, and I think they have a great brand. Third team is going to be Stanford. That might be surprising, but Stanford has a better brand than people realize, and Stanford has a strong connection to Notre Dame. So I would have Stanford in. The next team would be Syracuse. Only because of the size of their fan base, they have massive potential, but Syracuse, you have got to support your football team more if you want to show any value to any of these big-time conferences. The next team that makes the cut is South Carolina. Look, South Carolina has had some bad seasons, and they had some glory years under Steve Spurrier. But the one constant for South Carolina is their fan support. They will fill Williams-Brice Stadium even if they're going to go over. Yeah, I remember that 0-12 season. You filled the stadium each and every home game. So South Carolina makes the cut. The next team that makes the cut, staying in the SEC, Mississippi State, I think they're in the same type of boat as South Carolina. Not quite the same type of fan support that South Carolina gets, but I think they have a decent enough brand and they get enough fan support. The next team that makes the cut, Iowa State. Ames, Iowa. It is tough to win there. The brand's not the strongest, but great fan support. So I think Iowa State makes the cut. The next team on the list, Missouri. Hey, when Missouri's good, they have great fan support. When they're bad, it's so-so. But they have a great TV market in Kansas City, and I think that's enough for Missouri to get the nod to branch off with everybody else. The next team on the list, Virginia. Very up and down. Now we're getting more into the splitting hairs type of situation. I think Virginia does just enough to be able to break off with everybody else. I think they have a decent TV market. Virginia, you're safe. Next up on the list, TCU. The problem with TCU is they have to compete with Baylor, Texas, and Texas A&M for fan support, but they have proven that they can hold their own, so I think TCU barely makes it. Next team on the list, and I was very up and down about this team, and that's Kansas State. I think Kansas State gets the vast majority of fan support when it comes to football, so you're basically getting the state of Kansas if you bring in Kansas State, as long as they stay relevant. Down to the last two, and the first spot goes to, and it pains me to say it, and that's Pitt. Hey, they can't fill their stadium half the time, but Pitt has a pretty good brand. They just won the ACC. I would throw them in there just to see what they can do. And hey, I reserve the right that if you can't hold your own, you can be kicked out and bring somebody in. But for now, I would put Pitt in. And finally, the last team, I was actually going between Arizona and Arizona State to get the state of Arizona represented. Right now, Arizona football is atrocious, so I went with Arizona State. But like I said before, I reserve the right to kick somebody out if they're not holding their own and stick somebody else in. So those are the top 50 brands that I would have branch off from the NCAA and create their own national championship and playoffs. Now the teams that I'm still sticking with a solid no, that's Illinois, Indiana, Maryland, Northwestern, Rutgers, Kansas, Vanderbilt, Boston College, Duke, Wake Forest, Cal, Oregon State, Washington State. Sorry, I just don't think your brands are strong enough to even be put on deck. But I do have some teams that I have on deck, in case one of the teams that are already in the top 50 can't hold their own and have to be kicked out. So these are the teams that are on deck. I have Houston on deck. Now they have a massive potential TV market, but once again, they have to compete with Baylor, TCU, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, and Texas for fan support. So as of right now, I would have them the lowest graded Texas team. But hey, they could work themselves into the top 50. This next choice might surprise some people because they just got into the playoffs, and that's Cincinnati. The problem with Cincinnati is they're in the state of Ohio. But go to Blue Dude. That city has over 2 million in that metro area. That's true, but most of them are Ohio State fans. Right now, only 200,000 people identify as Cincinnati football fans when it comes to the Bearcats. You need to bump up that number if you want to get the nod to the top 50 teams. Next up on deck, UCF. Kind of the same situation as Houston. They're a pretty good brand, but they're the lowest brand in the state of Florida. But hey, you could always work yourself into the top 50. Next up on the list, Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech has a decent potential TV market. Hey, when the Yellow Jackets are really good, they actually draw in a pretty decent crowd from the Atlanta metro area. But right now, Georgia carries the state of Georgia. But if the Yellow Jackets can get better and their brand gets better and somebody can't hold their weight in the top 50, there you go, Yellow Jackets. You'll be bumped in the top 50. This next team is one of the ones that I was going back and forth with, Arizona. I was going back and forth between Arizona and Arizona State, and right now Arizona State is just doing better in football and their brand is better. But if you can rebuild your program, maybe you can make it into the top 50 if somebody else can't hold their own. And finally, Colorado. I was on the fence about Colorado, but I don't think they've done quite enough to get the nod, but they're in the same position as all the other teams that are on deck. Hey, build up your brand, have some success, hope somebody falters in the top 50, and you can make the jump into the top 50. So yes, it can be interchangeable if some brands fall off and they're not holding their own, and the brands that don't make the cut ramp up their brands and they get bumped into the top 50. And there's two group of 5 teams, 2 teams that are still in the group of 5s, haven't been called to the Pac-12, haven't been called to the Big Ten or the Big 12 or the SEC or the ACC, and that's Memphis and Boise State. You guys are also on deck. You're putting money into your football facilities. You do have pretty good brands, but right now I have you on deck. And if somebody falters and you can keep building that brand, then you would be put in the top 50. So y'all let me know in the comments section. Number 1, do you agree with my top 50? Number 2, if you don't, who would you pull out and who would you put in the top 50 brands? Remember, this is strictly hypothetical and it's probably not going to happen. That's all I got for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.